the situation on the Sino-Soviet border. Turn 1, the mobilisation of the southern military districts has alarmed the Chinese. So the Chinese have sort of semi-mobilised their forces on the border. They've also got a load more strategic reserves in central China, which are ready to move in. These are over here. There's going to be no activity on the first turn, apart from Soviets can move some of their forces into position to make an attack. So the old border runs from Vladivostok all the way through Manchuria here, down into Tashkent and Xinjiang, I think it's pronounced. Okay. Then it actually goes way over here and continues along Tashkent, Xinjiang borders all the way down to Afghanistan. Now this has been done by using the module, the Far East module. Now what we're doing is, this is sort of setting the scene. Now I'm only going to deal with a China against Russia conflict. The Chinese are basically thinking that if they let the Russians overwhelm the West, the problem is they're going to end up next, because the Soviets do have a claim on Manchuria. What I've done in terms of the neutrals, with North Korea and South Korea, they're keeping out of it. They're too busy standing each other off on the border, on the peninsula. Japan is staying neutral, keeping out of it. The Chinese forces down south on the border with Vietnam, now they are going to be staying there, even though Vietnamese forces are remaining neutral. They're thinking, oh, we're too far away from Russia, this is really risky. If we wanted any supplies coming in, they have to come in by sea, and NATO control the Pacific effectively. Any other nations of Southeast Asia I'm not including. I don't think they'd ever get involved in a war like this. Taiwan is obviously staying out of it because of the rivalry with Communist China. There are American forces in the Pacific region, but we're working on the basis that China is not going to allow American forces on their soil, and they're not going to allow American aircraft to overfly their territory. Now that could change depending on how bad things get for the Chinese. Now, the Chinese army, on the ground, it's not too bad. They've got a lot of militia forces in these border guard divisions, in these forts here. They're really there to slow up any Soviet attack. There are some decent units in the reserve. The standard units are pretty poor. They've got a reasonable amount of aircraft, but they're technologically they're not as good, and there's some rules. Like China always has to deploy for air superiority first, and they need 2 planes for every Soviet plane when you're calculating who's got air superiority. They've also got very poor maintenance levels compared to the Russians, and the planes are much worse than the Russians. In terms of the Soviet army in the Far East, it's not up to scratch compared to what's going on in the West. There are some good units deployed in Manchuria, but most of the units along the border are not much better than their Chinese equivalent. So that's it. Anyone's interested in these modules, you can download them from the Board Game Geek site. Just go to Battle for Germany, Third World War, and you'll find Asian fronts and Palestinian fronts there. Just to be aware that the Asian front is a lot bigger than this, as I'm not using Southeast Asia, which is another huge map set.